Hello friends, welcome back to our storytelling channel. This time, we're sharing a story about a husband who forced his wife to get on her knees and beg forgiveness from the other woman. The very next moment, he regretted it and wept when the truth was finally revealed. Before the story begins, please write in the comments section which city you are joining us from. Don't forget to hit like and subscribe so this channel can grow and continue to bring you more interesting stories. My name is Emily. For the last 6 years, I always believed that the small house I shared with my husband was the safest place to come home to. Ryan and I didn't marry for wealth or status. We started everything from the bottom. When others were throwing extravagant wedding receptions at grand hotels, we just had a simple ceremony at my parents' house. There were no luxurious decorations, no overflowing catering, just sincere prayers from family, hoping we could build a household filled with blessings. That day, Ryan held my hand tightly. I might not be able to give you a luxurious life yet, Emily, but I promise I will try to be a good husband. That simple sentence was something I always cherished in my heart. From the first day of our marriage, I tried to be a supportive wife in every step he took. I woke up early to prepare breakfast, making sure his shirts were crisp before he left for work, and taking care of the house until late afternoon. Even though our life was simple, I felt it was enough. To me, happiness wasn't about the size of the house or the size of the bank account. Happiness was when someone came home safe and still had time to sit together, enjoy a warm cup of coffee, and talk about the day they had just been through. Ryan used to be like that. Every night, he would tell long stories about his work, his friends, even small things that made him laugh. I always listened. Sometimes I laughed along. Sometimes I offered encouragement when his work felt heavy. I believed communication was one of the ways to keep a marriage warm. That's why, for years, I never felt any distance between us. Things started to change when Ryan's career skyrocketed. The corporation where he worked gave him the promotion he had always dreamed of. His income increased, but so did his responsibilities. As a wife, naturally, I was proud. I was even willing to cut back on household expenses so he could attend various training seminars to support his work. I even secretly sold some jewelry my mother gave me when Ryan needed extra funds to take professional certifications. He never asked, but I did it willingly. I believed every sacrifice made for the family would return as happiness someday. A few months after that promotion, the rhythm of our lives began to slowly shift. Ryan started coming home late more often. The reasons were always the same: an extra meeting, a client to meet, office targets were high. Initially, I never made an issue of it. I was actually worried seeing his tired face every time he came home. Ensure the food on the table was still warm when he arrived. But lately, our little habits started disappearing one by one. We no longer ate dinner together. We rarely talked before sleep. Even weekends, which we usually used for grocery shopping or just a leisurely walk in the city park, were now often filled with work excuses. I tried to understand, doesn't being a partner mean supporting each other through the busiest times? One afternoon, while organizing the closet, I found an old photo album. Inside were pictures from the early journey of our marriage. There was a photo when we got caught in the rain returning from the market, a photo of us laughing at our favorite burger joint. There was also a photo when we managed to buy our first refrigerator after saving for nearly a year. Without realizing it, I smiled. So, many simple memories that felt so precious back then. That was when the sound of the front door opening was heard. "You're home, honey," I greeted him, bringing a glass of water. "Yeah." His answer was short, unlike usual. He went straight to the bedroom, while staring at his phone screen. I watched his back as he walked quickly. For some reason, something felt different. Not because he came home late, but because the look in his eyes seemed preoccupied with something else. That night, we ate together, but the atmosphere was so silent. I tried to open a conversation a few times. "How was work today?" "Okay." "Another office event tomorrow?" "Yeah." His answers were brief. I didn't push it. Maybe he was genuinely exhausted. That's what I thought at the time. A few days later, my old friend Rachel came to visit. We chatted in the living room while enjoying hot tea. "Emily, you look tired." I smiled slightly. "Maybe just lack of rest." Rachel looked at me for quite a while. "Don't forget to take care of yourself, too." Sometimes a wife is too busy taking care of everyone else that she forgets to take care of herself. That statement sounded simple, but for some reason, it kept echoing in my head. That night, I stood for a long time in front of the mirror. I looked at myself. My face did look more tired compared to a few years ago. Dark circles under my eyes were starting to show. My hands felt rougher from too often doing housework. I then smiled faintly at the reflection in the mirror. "It's okay, Emily," I whispered softly. "All of this is for the family." I still believed our household was just passing through a busy phase. I still believed my husband remained the same man as before. I still believed everything would return to normal. But I didn't realize that outside the home I had guarded wholeheartedly, Ryan's life was slowly being filled with secrets I had never imagined before. And without me knowing, someone named Sarah had entered the circle of our lives, bringing changes that would eventually shake my entire belief about the meaning of loyalty. Since the conversation with Rachel a few days ago, I started trying to view my household life from a different perspective. Not because I wanted to suspect Ryan, I just wanted to understand what was actually happening. Every morning, my routine was still the same. I woke up before dawn, prepared a simple breakfast, brewed Ryan's favorite coffee, then laid out his work clothes. That habit I had done since the beginning of our marriage never felt like a burden. When Ryan stepped out of the room in the shirt I had ironed neatly, I still welcomed him with a smile. "Honey, breakfast is ready." "Yeah, thanks." His tone remained polite but sounded flat. He sat at the dining table while occasionally checking his phone screen. His fingers moved quickly to reply to several messages. Even when I placed a plate of his favorite scrambled eggs in front of him, his gaze hadn't left the screen. I chose to remain silent. Perhaps there was indeed urgent work business. After a few bites, Ryan stood up. "I'm leaving early today. There's a meeting. Hope it goes well, honey." He just nodded slightly before walking out of the house. I watched his car until it disappeared down the street. I don't know since when, but it felt increasingly difficult to get the warm smile that used to always send me off. Every morning, that day, I decided to clean out the small storage shed behind the house. There were many old things untouched for years. Among the pile of boxes, I found a box containing memories from the beginning of our marriage. There were the first movie tickets we saved. There was the receipt for the dining table we paid off over several months. There was also a small, handwritten note from Ryan. The writing was starting to fade, but the content could still be read. "For Emily, thank you for choosing to walk with me. If one day I succeed, never Let me turn into a person who forgets where he started. I took a deep breath. That sentence felt so warm. Without realizing it, I held the letter for a long time. I hoped the man who wrote it still existed inside. Ryan, today, in the late afternoon, my phone rang. It was my mother calling. How are you two doing, dear? Thank God. We're good, Mom. And Ryan? Is he healthy? He's healthy. I answered as best I could. I didn't want to make Mom worry just because of small changes I couldn't even explain yet. My mother then talked about the garden back home and neighbors who had just thrown a celebration. That light chat warmed my mood a little. Before hanging up, she said softly, "If the household is being tested with busyness, don't stop praying for each other." I agreed with that advice. Prayer is often a pillar when words are no longer able to explain the situation. Over the next few days, the changes in Ryan grew more palpable. He was now receiving phone calls outside the house more often. If his phone rang while we were having dinner, he would ask permission to step out for a moment. Office, call. I always trusted him. After all, his job demanded a lot of responsibility. However, there was one thing that started to bother my mind. Ryan now seemed to pay more attention to his appearance than usual. He bought new cologne, replaced his old watch with a more modern model. One morning, he even chose his own tie that he thought was more suitable for attending an important meeting. I smiled seeing him in the mirror. "You're getting sharper these days, honey," Ryan replied with a thin smile. "Job demands." That answer sounded reasonable, but somehow, I felt there was a distance slowly growing between us. An invisible distance, but one I could feel every day. The weekend arrived. I hoped we could spend time together like we used to. I had already prepared ingredients to cook Ryan's favorite meal. However, after breakfast, he approached me wearing a casual shirt. "Sorry, Emily. I have to go out for a bit today." "More work?" "Yeah, project discussion with some colleagues." I nodded slowly. "All right then, be careful." Ryan stared at me for a few seconds, as if wanting to say something, but in the fist is sand, and he just took the car keys and left. The house returned to silence. I sat, alone in the living room, staring at the 2 cups of coffee I had prepared earlier. 1 cup for me, 1 for Ryan. The coffee in his cup was slowly losing its steam. Just like my hope that this weekend would be our chance to talk longer. I didn't know where Ryan actually went that day. I also didn't know who the people were that he was now spending his time with. What I knew was that changes in a household, no matter how small, never just appear out of nowhere. There's always a beginning that seems simple. And without me realizing it, the first step towards the reality that would change my life had begun on that day. The days following that weekend felt even longer. I still went through my routine as usual. Preparing breakfast, cleaning the house, watering the plants in the yard, then waiting for Ryan to come home every night. From the outside, nothing had changed. Our house still stood quietly, and the neighbors still saw us as a harmonious couple. But only I knew that the warmth inside the house was slowly fading. Ryan was coming home late more and more often. Even when he was home, his mind seemed left somewhere else. After dinner, he would immediately go into the bedroom, carrying his phone. One night, while he was showering, his phone left on the bedside table suddenly vibrated. I had absolutely no intention of opening it. In 6 years of marriage, I always maintained my trust in Ryan. To me, everyone deserves personal space. but the phone screen lit up, displaying the name of a message sender I had never seen before. The message only appeared for a few seconds before the screen went dark again. "Thanks, Ryan. Good thing you were there." I stared at the dark screen without saying anything. Maybe it was indeed a colleague, maybe just office business. I tried to calm myself down. When Ryan came out of the bathroom, he immediately grabbed his phone. "Who contacted you, honey?" I asked quietly. Ryan paused for a split second. "Oh, a female colleague from the office. Yeah, a new hire in our division." His answer sounded casual. I nodded. There was no reason for me to prolong the conversation. But for some reason, the name Sarah kept appearing in my mind until I found it hard to close my eyes that night. A few days later, Rachel invited me to meet again at a small coffee shop not far from the house. We talked about many things until finally, Rachel noticed. My face looked unenthusiastic. "You have a lot on your mind." I smiled faintly. "I don't know, maybe I'm just too tired." Rachel had known me since high school. She knew when I was hiding something. "If there's a problem, don't bottle it up alone." I sighed softly. Ryan has changed lately. Changed how? Busier, quieter. Now he's frequently in touch with a new female colleague. Rachel didn't immediately comment. She just said carefully, "Busyness can indeed change someone's habits. But if something feels off, talk about it properly with him." I nodded. That was what I actually wanted to do. I just hadn't found the right time. The opportunity came a few nights later. Ryan came home a little earlier than usual. I deliberately prepared his favorite dinner, hearty chicken soup and grilled fish that used to always make him eat heartily. When the atmosphere felt calm enough, I ventured to open the conversation. "Honey, lately we rarely talk." Ryan put down his spoon. "Sorry. I really have a lot of work. I understand, but I feel like we're getting further apart." He took a deep breath. "Don't think crazy things, Emily." "I'm not thinking crazy things. I just miss my husband who he used to be." The room suddenly went silent. For the first time in a long while, Ryan looked slightly uncomfortable. "I'm doing all this for our future too. I never forbid you from working. Then why keep bringing it up?" His tone started rising. I was startled. During our marriage, Ryan almost never spoke that sternly to me. "I just want us to have time together." "I'm tired, Emily." That sentence sounded cold. Not the content that hurt me, but the way he said it. I chose to end the conversation. There was no point continuing when emotions started taking over. The night grew late. I couldn't sleep yet. From behind the bedroom window, I saw the living room light was still on. Ryan turned out to be on a video call. His voice was deliberately lowered so I couldn't hear the content of the conversation. A few minutes later, he smiled, slightly. A smile I hadn't seen in a long time when he talked to me. When he realized I was standing near the door, Ryan hastily ended the call. "Haven't slept yet? I wanted a drink." "Oh." He immediately put his phone in his pocket. I didn't ask anything. But for the first time since we married, a feeling arose that I had never felt before. Not anger, nor disappointment, but unrest that slowly eroded the sense of calm in my heart. The next morning, while changing the dining tablecloth, my phone rang. The number calling was not saved in my contacts. I answered it. "Hello," for a few seconds. There was no answer. Then, the voice of a woman was heard, soft, but sounding so unfamiliar. Is this Mrs. Emily? Yes, correct. Who is this? The woman took a slow breath before answering. I'm Sarah. I fell silent. The name that for the past few days had only been on Ryan's phone screen was now heard directly in my ear. And without realizing it, the brief conversation that had just begun would become the first door to a reality I never wanted to. Imagine. My heart beat faster after hearing the woman on the other end of the phone mention her name. Sarah? I gripped the phone a little tighter. Is there something I can help you with? I asked, trying to remain calm. Sarah's voice sounded soft and measured, as if she had prepared every sentence she would speak. Sorry for contacting you without notice. I just want to talk, briefly. Not long. About what? About Ryan. I fell silent. Several seconds passed without a single word coming out of my crumbs mouth. Sarah spoke again. I feel you have the right to know certain things, but I don't want to explain it over the phone. Her words made my chest feel tight. What do you mean? If you are willing, we could meet. I just want to explain the actual situation. Before I could answer, the phone connection was cut off. I stared at the phone screen for quite a while. The number was still saved in the call history, but my mind was filled with various questions. Why was this woman looking for me? What was her relationship with Ryan? And why did she sound so sure that I needed to know something? In the evening, Ryan came home as usual. I watched his tired-looking face. For a few moments, I almost canceled my intention to ask. But the image of the places, conversation with Sarah kept filling my mind. Honey, yeah, earlier, a woman named Sarah called me. Ryan's hand, which was setting down his briefcase, suddenly stopped. His expression changed for an instant, though he tried to hide it. Sarah? Yeah. What did she say? I looked my husband in the eye. Strange, honey. Instead of asking where she got my phone number, you just immediately want to know the content of the conversation. Ryan looked lost for words for a few seconds. Well, what did she say? She said she wanted to meet me. Ryan's face immediately tensed up. You don't need to meet her. The answer came, out so quickly. I was even more confused. Why? If she was just a colleague. If she's really just a colleague, why do you look worried? Ryan rubbed his face slowly. She sometimes tends to misunderstand things. I don't want you getting dragged into it. I tried to understand his explanation. However, something felt off. All this time, Ryan was always calm and facing various problems. That day, for the first time, I saw a nervousness that was so clear on his face. 2 days later, while shopping for groceries at a supermarket, someone called my StartCom. Name: Mrs. Emily. I turned. A woman in her late 20s stood a few steps from me. Her appearance was neat with elegant work clothes. Her smile looked friendly, but her eyes held a certainty I found difficult to interpret. I'm Sarah. I immediately recognized that name. It turned out this was the woman I had only heard of from Ryan's words and seen on his phone screen. Oh, it's you. Sorry. If I startled you. I nodded politely. Is there something you want to discuss? Sarah looked around, ensuring not many people were paying attention. Can we sit for a moment in the cafe next door? I hesitated, but curiosity finally overcame my doubt. We sat facing each other. For a few moments, no one spoke. Sarah took a deep breath before finally opening the conversation. I know this isn't easy. What do you mean? Ryan and I have worked on the same team for almost a year. I just listened. He often helps with my work. That's a good thing. Yes. Sarah smiled faintly. Over time, we became close. That sentence made my hand holding the glass slowly tense up. I kept trying to maintain my tone of voice. Close as colleagues? Sarah lowered her head for a moment. More than that. I fell silent. The noise around the cafe suddenly felt distant. I tried to remain calm. What do you mean? Ryan often talked about his household. I stared at her, unblinking. He said, for a long time he felt misunderstood. My chest felt tight hearing that sentence. I didn't immediately believe it. What is your purpose in telling me all this? Sarah answered slowly. I don't want to keep living a lie. Before I could give a response, a voice I knew very well was heard from behind. Emily. I turned. Ryan stood a few feet from our table. His face was full of panic. He walked quickly, approaching us. Why did you come here? He asked, Sarah sternly. Sarah stood up slowly. I just wanted to be honest. I told you not to see my wife. Ryan then looked at me. Emily, go home. I didn't immediately stand up. Honey, what is actually happening? Ryan shook his head. This is all a .com misunderstanding, Sarah immediately interrupted. If it really is a misunderstanding, why all this time did you always ask me to keep our relationship a secret from Mrs. Emily? That statement made the atmosphere instantly freeze. Several patrons began glancing in our direction. Ryan looked increasingly agitated. That's not what you think. I looked at my husband's face, whom I had always trusted. Then I shifted my gaze to Sarah, who looked so convinced by every word she said. For the first time in 6 years of our marriage, I truly didn't know who was telling the truth. However, one thing I started to realize. The secret that all this time was only a suspicion slowly surfaced. And that brief meeting in a cafe became the beginning of the cracking of trust I had guarded wholeheartedly for years. Throughout the journey home from the cafe, not a single word came out of my mouth. Ryan drove the car with his gaze straight ahead. His face looked tense, while both his hands gripped the steering wheel tighter than usual. I wanted to ask many times, but every time I looked at his facial expression, I abandoned the intention. Arriving home, Ryan went straight into the small home office, located next to the living room. I prepared a glass of warm water and placed it on the table. Honey, I want to be alone right now. His answer was short. I nodded slowly. That night, we slept in silence. The next morning, I tried to start the day as usual. I prepared breakfast, brewed Ryan's favorite coffee, then waited for him at the dining table. However, when he sat down, the atmosphere felt awkward. Again, honey. About yesterday's incident. I don't want to discuss it. I just want to know what actually happened. Ryan sighed deeply. Sarah just misunderstood. Then why did she say things like that in front of me? That's my business. That answer silenced me. During our marriage, Ryan never closed a conversation with a sentence like that. I started to feel that the wall between us was getting higher. At midday, while cleaning the yard, my phone rang. The same number appeared. Again, I hesitated to answer it. But finally, I pressed the answer button. Hello? Hello, Mrs. Emily. Sarah's voice sounded calm. I just wanted to apologize for the incident yesterday. What do you actually want? I want everything to end well. What does that mean? I think we should meet one more time. I took a deep breath. Sorry, I don't. I think that's necessary. If that's the case, I respect your decision. The phone connection ended. I thought the matter was finished. It turned out I was wrong. 2 days later, Ryan came home faster than usual. But this time his face was far different. His gaze was sharp, his steps fast. As soon as he entered the house, he immediately called me. I, who was folding clothes, immediately approached him. Yes, honey. Did you meet Sarah again? I frowned in surprise. No, don't Lee. I really didn't meet her. Ryan took out his phone. Then what is this? He showed several screenshots of a conversation. There, messages from me to Sarah were visible. If you still approach my husband, you will regret it. There were other sentences that were harsher. I immediately shook my head. That's not my message. How long will you deny it? Asked Ryan. I truly never sent that message. Sarah wiped the corner of her eye using a tissue. I actually didn't want to blow up this problem, Ryan. Sarah, Ryan said softly, I just wanted to work professionally, but every day I feel afraid. I stared at her in disbelief. Afraid of whom? Sarah just lowered her face as if holding back tears. That attitude only made Ryan more convinced that I had hurt her. Emily. Ryan's voice rose for the first time during our marriage. How many more times does Sarah have to cry because of your actions? Tears started pooling in my eyes. Honey, listen to me. What else is there to hear? I'm being slandered. Enough. That voice echoed in the front yard of the house. Some neighbors, who were doing activities, began to glance in our direction. I felt my cheeks heat up from embarrassment. But what was more painful wasn't the gaze of others, but the brain's gaze of my own husband. A gaze now filled with anger and disappointment. I've known Sarah all this time at the office. Then what about me, Ryan? My voice shook. We've been husband and wife for 6 years. Ryan was silent for a moment, but his anger hadn't subsided. Sarah has apologized many times. What does she have to apologize for if I never did anything? I want everything to finish today. I looked at Ryan's face confusedly. What do you mean? Ryan took a deep breath. Forget all these problems. I want that too. If you truly regret it. He paused for a moment. Apologize to Sarah. I stared at him as if disbelieving what I had just heard. Apologize? Yes. For a mistake I never committed. Ryan nodded firmly. If necessary. The next sentence made my whole body feel weak. Show your sincerity. Get on your knees right here and beg for Sarah's forgiveness so this all ends. The world seemed to stop spinning. I looked at my husband's face, hoping he was joking. But no, his expression remained serious. Meanwhile, Sarah stood a few steps from me without saying a word. Tears flowed down, wetting my cheeks. Honey, my voice was almost inaudible. Does my self-worth mean nothing anymore? In your eyes? Ryan closed his eyes briefly. I just want this problem to end, but not this way. I shook my head slowly. I cannot admit a mistake I never committed. Ryan looked at me again. If so, you choose to maintain your pride. That sentence felt sharper than a knife. I looked at the house I had guarded, wholeheartedly, all this time. A house once filled with laughter. A house that witnessed every prayer and my sacrifice. Now, right in the front yard of that house, my own husband asked me to lower my dignity before another woman. I closed my eyes. In my heart, I kept praying that God knew I wasn't maintaining arrogance. I was only defending the truth. Several seconds passed in silence. Then, for the sake of maintaining the household I had fought for all this time, I slowly lowered my body. My knees touched the grass of the yard. Tears continued to fall without me being able to hold them back. I hadn't had time to do anything when from the direction of the Falves driveway, someone's voice was heard shouting loudly, "Stop!" That voice made everyone turn simultaneously. A middle-aged man dressed neatly walked quickly, entering our front yard with a face full of anger. His gaze was immediately aimed at Ryan and Sarah. "What exactly are you people doing?" Ryan looked surprised to recognize the figure. Meanwhile, Sarah's face, which was initially calm, instantly turned pale. For the first time since all this chaos began, it was clearly visible that someone knew the big secret that had been hidden all this time. "Stop!" The stern voice made the atmosphere, initially filled with emotion, suddenly freeze. I, who was still on my knees, slowly lifted my head. A middle-aged man, around 60 years old, walked quickly into our yard. He wore a simple white shirt and a gray suit jacket. His face looked stern, but the look in his eyes implied deep disappointment. Ryan looked shocked. "Mr. Sterling." "Sir, I just realized that the man was Mr. Sterling, the CEO of the corporation where Ryan worked. All this time, I had only heard his name few times from Ryan's stories, but had never met him in person. What made me even more astonished, Sarah's face suddenly turned pale. She retreated one step, unconsciously. Mr. Sterling approached us with a sharp gaze. "What are you doing here?" No one answered. His gaze then stopped on me, still in a kneeling position. "Mrs. Emily, please stand up." His voice was calm but full of authority. I stood up slowly while wiping my tears. Mr. Sterling then turned to Ryan. "Is it true you asked your wife to apologize to Sarah like this?" Ryan looked nervous. "Sir, this is just a private matter. A private matter that makes a wife humiliated in front of her own house?" Ryan lowered his head. Before he could answer, Sarah hurriedly spoke up. "Sir, everything isn't as you see it." Mr. Sterling looked at Sarah with an indicator expression difficult to guess. "Oh, I just wanted to resolve a misunderstanding." "You sure that's just it?" Mr. Sterling's tone of voice turned heavier. Sarah clasped both her hands. "I don't understand what you mean, sir." Mr. Sterling took out a brown manila folder from the bag he carried. "I actually didn't want to open all this in front of many people." He pulled out several documents. "This report just reached my desk this morning." Ryan started to look agitated. "What report, sir?" Mr. Sterling didn't immediately answer. Instead, he took out several printed sheets of digital conversations. "I asked the company IT department to conduct an examination after several conflicting reports appeared." My heart beat faster. Mr. Sterling continued. "The number used to send threatening messages to Sarah turned out not to belong to Mrs. Emily." I looked at Ryan. My husband's face slowly changed. Everything originated from a prepaid card registered using a fake identity. Sarah immediately interrupted. "That doesn't necessarily prove anything." Mr. Sterling looked at her sharply. "Correct. However, the next examination is far more interesting." He took out another sheet. The entire security camera access record of the office on the day Mrs. Emily was accused of coming turned out to have been examined by us. I held my breath. "And The result? Mr. Sterling paused for a moment. Mrs. Emily never entered the company building. Ryan immediately turned towards Sarah. Sarah. The woman started losing her composure. Maybe the camera was broken. No. Mr. Sterling shook his head. The cameras are functioning perfectly. He reopened the folder. We even found something far more surprising. The atmosphere returned to silence. The person who asked security to make a fake report was not a security officer. Everyone looked at Mr. Sterling, but someone from inside the office. Ryan looked increasingly confused. Who? Mr. Sterling lifted his gaze slowly. Sarah. I saw Sarah's face change drastically. She retreated a few steps. That's not true. Mr. Sterling handed a USB flash drive to Ryan. Inside is the recording from the company lobby. Camera. Impossible. Sarah's voice started to shake. The recording shows you talking to the security officer for nearly 30 minutes. Ryan accepted the flash drive with a trembling hand. Mr. Sterling continued. After that meeting, the report about Mrs. Emily was created. I saw the color drain from my husband's face. His gaze slowly shifted to me. For the first time, since all these slanders began, doubt appeared in his eyes. However, the surprises weren't over. Mr. Sterling sighed deeply before saying, there is still one thing that all this time no one knew. Everyone fell silent. Again, he looked at Sarah with a face full of disappointment. I already considered you like my own child. That sentence made Ryan frown. Mr. Sterling continued in a quiet voice. Sarah is my wife's own niece. I was shocked. Ryan also looked like he didn't believe it. All this time, I tried to keep our family relationship secret, so there would be no special treatment at the office. He shook his head slowly. But I never thought that trust was actually abused. Tears began to flow down Sarah's face. Uncle, I can explain. Explain what? Mr. Sterling looked deep into her eyes. Explain why you slandered someone's wife? Sarah couldn't answer. However, amid that silence, suddenly, the ring of Mr. Sterling's phone was heard. He looked at the name, appearing on the screen. His expression turned serious. Hello? For a few seconds, he just listened. His face suddenly turned pale. What? His voice sounded trembling. Do whatever it takes so that data doesn't disappear. I'm heading to the office immediately. The phone was closed. Mr. Sterling looked at Ryan with a face far more tense than before. This problem turns out to be bigger than we imagined. What do you mean, sir? Mr. Sterling gripped the flash drive tightly. Just now, the IT team found someone trying to delete all recordings and documents related to this case from the company server. Ryan fell silent. I, too, froze. If it was true someone was trying to eliminate all evidence, it meant this issue was no longer just mere slander committed by Sarah alone. There was someone else who had been working from behind the shadows all this time, and that person seemed willing to do anything, so the truth was never revealed. The front yard was still filled with silence. No one moved after Mr. Sterling ended his phone call. This problem turns out to be bigger than we imagined. That sentence kept echoing in my head. Ryan gripped the flash drive given by Mr. Portet. Sterling. His hand looked trembling. His face, which had been filled with anger, now started turning into confusion. Meanwhile, Sarah stood rooted to the spot. For the first time since I knew her, her self-confidence seemed to disappear. Mr. Sterling took a deep breath. I think everything cannot be resolved here. He then looked at me. Mrs. Emily, I want to invite you to come to the office. I was a little surprised. May? Yes. Ryan immediately interrupted. Sir, what for? Why should my wife come? Mr. Sterling looked at Ryan for quite a while. Because it's time for the whole truth to be opened. 1 hour later, we arrived at the company building. In 6 years of marriage, this was the first time I set foot in the place where Ryan worked. The building stood grand with glass walls reflecting the afternoon sunlight. I looked at the company logo plastered hugely on the front. Without realizing it, my chest felt tight. That logo was so familiar, not because I had worked there, but because, since childhood, I saw the same picture displayed in my father's workspace. I immediately averted my gaze. Those memories were always hard for me to face. Mr. Sterling took us toward the main meeting room. Several members of the board of directors were already inside. As soon as he entered, all meeting participants stood to greet him. But what surprised me, some people actually looked at me with surprised expressions. One white-haired man even whispered softly, "Is that really her?" I pretended not to hear. Ryan, walking beside me, looked confused. "Sir, what is actually happening?" Mr. Sterling didn't immediately answer. He asked everyone to sit. Then the corporate secretary brought a small metal box and placed it on the table. The box looked quite old. On top of it, initials were carved that I knew very well. My heart beat faster. Those were my father's initials. Mr. Sterling opened the box using a small key that he had always kept all this time. Inside were several original documents already yellowed with age. He lifted one of them. This document could only be opened after all members of the board of directors were present. The room became silent. Mr. Sterling began reading the contents of the letter. The last will and testament of the company founder. Ryan immediately turned toward me. I lowered my head. I had known the contents of the letter for years. However, I never thought the letter would be read today. Mr. Sterling's voice was heard clearly filling the room. If one day I am gone, the entire controlling stake of this company becomes the right of my daughter, Emily. Ryan's eyes went wide. Sarah looked like she didn't believe it. Mr. Sterling continued reading. As long as my daughter is not yet ready to lead the company, operational management is entrusted to the board of directors under the supervision of Mr. Sterling. The room started filling with whispers. I closed my eyes. Memories of my father filled my mind again. He founded this company from a small garage more than 30 years ago. I still remembered how he often came home late at night with clothes full of dust, but always made time to have dinner with the family. Father once said, "Wealth can be sought again, but honesty cannot be bought." That sentence I always remembered when he passed away due to illness. I was still in my early 20s. That's when he left one final request. I was asked to live life simply. He didn't want me to be known as a company heiress. He wanted people to appreciate me because of my personality, not because of wealth or position. I held firmly to that will. Even to Ryan, the man who later became my husband. I only told him my father once was a businessman. I never explained further. Not because I wanted to lie, but because I was carrying out my father's final mandate. Mr. Sterling then placed the will on the table. He looked at all meeting participants. Starting today, I no longer want any secrets. He faced toward Ryan. All this time, your wife was not just the family of a businessman. Mr. Sterling paused for a moment. Mrs. Emily is the majority shareholder as well as the legitimate owner of this company. That sentence made the room seem to stop breathing. Ryan looked at me with a pale face. Emily. His voice was almost inaudible. You never said. I looked at my husband with eyes still filled with tears. I wanted to be loved as Emily, not as the daughter of the company owner. Ryan slowly sank into his chair. All the events of the last few days flashed back into his mind. How he defended Sarah, how he doubted his own wife, even how he asked me to lower my self-worth in front of another woman. Meanwhile, Sarah seemed to lose her balance to the point she had to hold on to the chair backrest. Her face was truly pale. She never imagined that the woman she had insulted and slandered all this time was actually the owner of the company she wanted to exploit for her ambition. However, their surprise wasn't over. The company secretary rushed into the meeting room carrying a tablet. Sorry to disturb, Mr. Sterling. What is it? The IT team managed to recover some data that was deleted. Mr. Sterling immediately stood up. Is the culprit known? The secretary nodded slowly. Yes, sir. Then who? The room returned to silence. The secretary looked at everyone one by one before finally saying, the perpetrator who deleted the evidence turned out not to be Sarah. Everyone looked at each other, but someone who has been sitting in the company management ranks all this time. Hearing that sentence, the faces of several directors suddenly turned tense. It turned out the betrayal happening all this time was not just a household issue. Behind all the slander against me was hidden a game far bigger. A game targeting the company inherited from my late father. The perpetrator who deleted the evidence turned out not to be Sarah. Everyone looked at each other. Then who? Asked Mr. Sterling firmly. The secretary turned on a large screen located at the end of the meeting room. Several security camera recordings started playing. A man appeared entering the company data center room at night, using a special access card. His face wasn't too clear, because he wore a hat and mask, but his height, posture, and way of walking looked familiar enough to some people. The secretary then enlarged the image from another camera. This time, the man's face was visible more clearly. The room was immediately filled with shocked voices. That's Mr. Davies. One of the directors spontaneously stood from his chair. Mr. Davies was the chief operating officer who had worked with my late father for over 15 years. All this time, he was known as a figure who was calm, experienced, and highly trusted. I myself still remembered him. When I was small, he often came to the house to discuss work with my father. I never thought his name would appear in this case. Mr. Sterling clenched his fists. I became suspicious the last few weeks. He looked at all meeting participants. The company server cannot possibly be accessed without permission from certain officials. Ryan still stared at the screen with a blank face. The more facts revealed, for more, he realized that everything happening all this time was far more complicated than he imagined. Mr. Sterling asked for the next recording to be played. This time, it wasn't a camera recording, but the results of recovered digital conversations that were deleted. On the screen appeared several messages between Mr. Davies and Sarah. The room became silent again. The contents of that conversation made everyone surprised. Keep getting close to Ryan. He's an honest person but easily trusts. Another message read, "If his wife starts getting suspicious, make Ryan doubt his wife." First, I held my breath. My hands started shaking. Every sentence that appeared on the screen seemed to explain all events that all this time I didn't understand. The mysterious calls, the slander, threatening messages, fake reports, everything turned out not to happen by coincidence. Ryan looked at Sarah with reddened eyes. "So all this time, you..." Sarah lowered her face. Her tears started falling. I was indeed carrying out Mr. Davies's orders. The room became noisy again. I was promised a job promotion. She cried. "He said I only needed to make Mr. Ryan's household problematic." "So, that what?" asked Mr. Sterling. Sarah bit her lip. "So, the company's attention was diverted." Mr. Sterling nodded slowly. "Exactly as I suspected." He then explained that over the last few months, there were a number of suspicious company transactions. If all directors were busy dealing with personal conflicts, then those deviations would be easier to hide. Everything Sarah did turned out to be just part of a much bigger plan. I turned toward Ryan. He was still transfixed, staring at the screen. His gaze was empty, as if the whole world he believed in all this time had just collapsed. A few moments later, he walked slowly toward me. "Emily." His voice trembled. I didn't answer. Ryan lowered his head. He stopped several times, as if having difficulty putting words together. "I've hurt you." Tears started flowing down his face. "I chose to trust someone else, rather than the woman who has accompanied me for 6 years. The room went silent again. Everyone was watching. Us. Ryan's voice got quieter. "Asked you to do something that should never have come out of a husband's mouth." I remained silent. Not because of anger, but because the wound inside my heart hadn't truly healed yet. Ryan spoke. Again. "I don't deserve your forgiveness." That sentence sounded so sincere. But, to me, an apology doesn't necessarily wipe away everything that happened. We could still clearly imagine how he asked me to humble myself in front of another woman. Still remembered was the look full of suspicion he directed at me. All that was impossible to forget in an instant. At the other side of the room, Sarah cried endlessly. She approached me with slow steps. "Mrs. Emily." I looked at her. I know I don't deserve to ask for anything. Her tears kept flowing. "I've gone too far." She lowered her head. "I apologize." I saw regret on her face. However, I also realized that regret cannot turn back time. What has been broken remains in need of a process to be fixed. When the atmosphere started to settle a little, a security officer entered the blank-stuttered meeting room. "Mr. Sterling, we've been looking for Mr. Davies. Where is he?" The officer shook his head. "He's not at home. His car has been gone from the garage since 2 hours ago." The room was filled with anxiety. Again, Mr. Sterling immediately stood up. "Contact the entire security team." He looked at the screen, still displaying evidence of the irregularities. "Don't let him take company documents." The officer nodded, then hurried out. I looked out the meeting room window. The afternoon sky started turning dark. Rain slowly fell, wetting the office courtyard. For some reason, my intuition said that all this wasn't really over yet. Mr. Davies was still missing. And as long as the person who was the mastermind hadn't been found, the threat to the company, inherited from my father, still existed. Meanwhile, in the corner of the room, Ryan could only look at me with eyes filled with regret. He finally understood one thing that came too late. Wealth, position, and everything he chased all, this time turned out to mean nothing compared to the trust of a wife that he had, destroyed with his own hands. Now he could only hope there was still a chance to redeem his mistake. However, that chance was no longer something he could ask for easily. Rain was still falling, wetting the company courtyard when the entire security team moved to search for Mr. Davies. Several hours later, the news waited for finally came. An officer ran into the meeting room. "Mr. Sterling, we found him." "Where?" "He was at the company retreat house." When the team arrived, he was trying to take a number of important documents. Mr. Sterling breathed a long sigh of relief. Thank goodness. The entire company documents were successfully secured before they could be misused. After being examined, various evidence of financial irregularities that had been going on for several years were found. All that made one reality become clearer. The conflict that destroyed my household turned out to only be used as a tool to divert attention from much bigger actions. Mr. Davies finally accounted for his actions through the applicable legal process. Meanwhile, Sarah, after giving all information honestly regarding her involvement, accepted the consequences for her actions, according to company rules. Before leaving the building, she approached me. "Mrs. Emily," her eyes filled with tears again. "I don't ask to be forgiven." I looked at her calmly. "I just want to say that every day I will regret what I have done." I nodded slowly. "May this be a lesson, so there are no other households hurt because of ambition." Sarah lowered her head. "Thank you for still being willing to speak to me." She then walked away. I didn't hate her, but I also couldn't just erase all the wounds she had left behind. Forgiving doesn't mean forgetting, but choosing not to carry hatred throughout life. A few days after all company matters were finished, I returned home. The house, that used to feel warm, was now filled with silence. Ryan still lived there. However, we spent more time in silence. One afternoon, I was watering the jasmine, flowers I planted since the beginning of our marriage, when Ryan approached me. "Emily." I turned slowly. He looked far different. His face was thinner. The look in his eyes lost the spirit that used to always be visible. In his hand was a small wooden box. I found this while cleaning the cabinet. He handed it to me. The box contained old letters, photos of the beginning of our marriage, and the first movie tickets that I used to keep neatly. At the very top was a piece of paper. I immediately recognized Ryan's handwritten letter from when we were newly married. "If one day I succeed, never let me turn into a person who forgets where he started." Ryan smiled bitterly. I myself broke my promise. Tears started filling his eyelids. I forgot how we started everything. He looked at me full of regret. "You were always there when I had nothing. When I didn't have a position yet. When I didn't have a car yet. When I was still counting money before buying dinner." Ryan's voice started trembling. Whereas when I succeeded, he lowered his head. I instead hurt the person most meritorious in my life. I gripped the letter tightly. There was no anger anymore in my heart. What remained was just sadness. Sadness because someone I loved very much turned into a person I barely recognized. Ryan slowly knelt before me right there on the grass. "Forgive me." His tears fell wetting the terrace floor. "The day when I asked you to humble yourself before someone else." He covered his face with both hands. "Is a day I will regret for the rest of my life." I saw his shoulders shake, holding back tears. I didn't deserve to be called a husband at that time. For a few moments, we were only accompanied by the sound of rain starting to subside. I finally spoke softly. "Ryan." He lifted his face. "I have forgiven you." His eyes widened. "Really?" I nodded. "Yes." "Then can we go back to how we used to be?" That question made me silent for quite a long time. I looked at the small garden we planted together years ago. Some flowers still bloomed beautifully, but there were also some that withered because they hadn't been cared for in too long. "Ryan, trust is like glass. If it cracks, it can still be put back together, but the marks will always be there." Tears flowed down Ryan's face again. "I understand. I won't force you. I will just try to be a better human being, even though perhaps I can never erase the wounds I made." I nodded slowly. "Time is the only thing capable of answering whether our relationship can recover fully. What's certain is I no longer live in a lie. I no longer have to prove the truth that indeed from the beginning was on my side." A few months later, the company founded by my late father was running well. Again, I accepted the mandate as majority shareholder, but handed daily management to trusted professionals according to principles taught by my father since long ago. Mr. Sterling remained accompanying me as an advisor. He often said, "Your father must be proud to see you." Every time I heard that sentence, I always looked at Father's photo now hanging in my workspace. In my heart, I whispered, "Emily has tried to guard the trust Father left behind." Meanwhile, Ryan chose to resign from his position, not because he was forced, but because he felt he had to start over from the beginning to redeem the mistakes he had made. Before leaving the office for the last time, he stood for quite a long time looking at the company logo. That's where he realized the biggest irony in his life. He once admired position, chased recognition, and easily trusted deceit. Whereas the woman who every day prepared breakfast, prayed for him, and faithfully accompanied him from the beginning was the owner of everything he's boasted about all this time. However, Emily never made wealth a reason to be respected. What she hoped for was just one simple thing: trust. Unfortunately, when Ryan finally understood the value of that trust, everything was already too late. Since that day, every time rain falls and the aroma of wet earth fills the Prastons' air, Ryan always remembers one event he will never be able to forget: the day when he almost made his wife humble her self-worth in front of another woman. The day that became the biggest regret in his entire life's journey. From the story just now, we learn that every life journey always carries a valuable message. Hopefully, there is wisdom we can pluck together today. If you liked a story like this, please press the like and subscribe buttons as a form of your support for this channel. Thank you for spending your time. Stay part of this storytelling channel and see you in the next inspiring story. Yeah.